Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar, How to Identify and Respond to High-Risk Domestic Violence Perpetrators, organized by the European Network for the Work with Perpetrators of Domestic Violence. We're happy to see you all here, and as you may notice, you don't have your camera or microphone enabled. However, we would love to hear from you, so please say hello in the chat, tell us where you're joining us from, and welcome to today's webinar. If you have any questions for our speakers at any point, please also leave them in the chat as we will have space later on to answer any questions. Just for your information, this event is being recorded and the recording will be available online and will be emailed to you later on as well. So many people from so many places across Europe. That's really great to see. Welcome, everyone. Hi, Jama. I'm just going to take a second to introduce our speakers. Before that, just to let you know, you can enable live captioning on Teams. Now I'm going to introduce you to our speakers for the webinar, Berta Vall and Nóra Regös. Berta is the Research and Development Manager at WWPEN. She has great expertise in research and data analysis in the fields of psychology and intimate partner violence. Nóra also does research at WWP, and she has a special focus on risk assessment and safety planning. I am going to bring them on the screen so that they can then continue with the presentation.
Thank you very much, Ture, for the presentation, and welcome everyone. We are happy to see that there is such an interest on this topic just before summer holidays, so we know that this is a complicated period, and thank you again for joining us. This webinar, we will be discussing how to identify and respond to high-risk domestic violence perpetrators. If we can move to the next slide. But first of all, I would like to introduce our organization because I am aware that not all of you are our members, so maybe you still don't know who we are. The European Network for the Work with Perpetrators, we have the aim of connecting Europe to end men's violence, and we connect Europe throughout our membership. We have now nearly 70 members that are spread around more than 30 different countries in Europe. We are a rather new organization. We were formally founded in 2014, and that means that this year we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary. We do very different activities. One of the main activities that we do is research, and the webinar, all the results that we will present in the webinar today are part of these activities that focus on research. In the research activities, we also promote evaluating the outcome of perpetrator programs, and we do this through the promotion of the Impact Outcome Monitoring Toolkit. This is a specific tool that we developed to assess the outcome of perpetrator programs. So this is not the topic of the webinar today, but you can also check in our website to get more information about this tool. We also collaborate in very different projects. You can also check in our website all the projects in which we have been collaborating, and we also offer capacity building and training activities, so also please keep on the loop to check on that. We also do a lot of communication efforts, and this image is part of our very recently launched website. So also please check in our website and you will see all the changes that we have been making in our communication actions. So this is a little bit the framework about us. Today we will be discussing, first of all, we want to very briefly introduce our newly launched standards, the minimum standards for working with perpetrators of domestic violence. After reviewing the standards, we will focus on the methodology that we have followed in this research. After the methodology, we will explain the results that we have obtained, and we will divide the results as we have thought about dividing this webinar in two main sections. So the first section will be to review the main risk assessment tools, so the main standardized tools that are used to assess the risk in perpetrator programs. And then we will present the results on how to intervene, how to work with high-risk perpetrators, and we will present different models and different recommendations around that. Finally, we will have some conclusions, and then also we will have time for Q&A. So if you have any question, please post it in the chat, and we will be collecting those at the end of the webinar. So, first of all, as I was saying, we want to review the European standards for perpetrator programs. We're not going to review all the standards. If we go to the next slide, you can see that the standards are divided in 5 main different sections. The first section is about the safety and well-being of survivors. The second section is about assessing and managing risk. The third section is about program design and delivery. The fourth section is about quality and evaluation, quality assessment and evaluation. And the last one is about the management of the organization. So please check our standards. You can see all the different indicators and recommendations that we have for each of these dimensions. But today I will focus on the second dimension, which focuses on assessing and managing risks. So what are the recommendations around that? If we go to the next slide. Here you have the link, but you also have it in the chat. My colleague has already shared it. So how should perpetrator programs assess risk? And now I'm going to explain in general what are our recommendations and what we have included in our standards. And then my colleague Nóra will go more in detail about the high-risk perpetrators and different models. But basically, our recommendation is that risk is assessed following a structured professional judgment, which means that risk has to be assessed using a combination of standardized risk assessment tool, but also with professional judgment and professional, let's say, discussion of the results. So we recommend that there is this combined action when assessing risk. We also recommend that risk is assessed as an ongoing process, so that the risk is not assessed just at the beginning of perpetrator program, but minimum we recommend that risk is assessed at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of the program. So this is our minimum recommendation. We also recommend that risk is assessed through gathering information from different sources. So that we recommend that the risk is not just assessed gathering information from the perpetrator itself, but also from other organizations, so just for example from police, but also very importantly, including the information from the victim or survivor. We also recommend that the same tool is used for perpetrator programs and for victim support services, so that we can compare the results. And then about the risk management, we also recommend that so that the intervention is tailored to the level of risk that we have obtained, and that, for example, there are responses to the level of risk that we obtain. And that means that we need protocols, we need roadmaps, how to act or how to respond to high-risk situations. And today we will see some of these recommendations and some of these protocols, but also that there are protocols for discussing cases from perpetrator programs, for example, between perpetrator programs and victim services, for example, so that there are protocols in which the information can be shared in order to discuss cases and manage this risk safely. So these are general recommendations. As I was saying, my colleague Nóra will go more in detail about how to respond to high-risk perpetrators, but these are kind of the minimum aspects that we should follow when we assess and manage risk. So if we go to the next slide, now I will focus on the methodology. What did we do in this project to get the information that Nóra will explain in a moment? Basically, first of all, we did desk research. So we assessed different publications that are available in terms of the two main topics of this webinar. The first one on the risk assessment tools available. So we reviewed 30 scientific articles and also 14 review articles on risk assessment tools. And then we also reviewed different publications on high risk, so different type of interventions with high risk perpetrators. We reviewed 39 scientific articles and also 13 review articles. All of these, let's say, articles and research gave us a lot of information, but specifically for the section on how to intervene with high-risk perpetrators, we also conducted some interviews with professionals from different models that we already knew and were aware of, and also different models that we could read in the research, because we wanted to gather more information about how this intervention with high-risk perpetrators how these interventions are put into practice. So this is what we did, and the results that you will see today are come from this research. As for the interviews, I'm not going to review this table in detail, and I've seen a question about sharing the presentation. We will share the presentation, so you will be able to look at this in detail. But basically here, what we wanted to show is that we have different countries represented in the interviews, and also that we try to gather information from high-risk models in different settings, so in prison settings, in prevention settings, and also in voluntary settings. So our idea was to gather information on how to intervene from these different perspectives, and this is what we will be discussing in a moment. And now we will move to the results, and I will give the floor to my colleague, Nóra. I think that you are muted, Nóra, if it's possible.
Now it will work. I cannot do this both at the same time. So welcome everyone. As Berta mentioned, now we will look into the results of these researches. And the first, I will focus on the risk assessment tools. We will discuss different dimensions and aspects of these most widely used tools. Here we just want to present 7 of them. Probably you are also familiar with many, or you are even using them in your daily practice. We just wanted to give you an overview to decide for certain situations or procedures which are the best one. So there is not one tool that is superior to the others, but for certain situations or for certain procedures, you can decide which one fits best to your purposes based on the aspects that we will discuss. The first dimension is whether the tool includes questions, explicit questions regarding coercive control or stalking, which are also like really main risk factors. And as you can see, danger assessment and DASH is the one that includes information on both. However, it doesn't mean that the other tools are not useful for in this regard, because like Be Safer, Odara, and Sarah also includes information on previous criminal history or breaching bills, which can be also connected to stalking or coercive control. The other dimension that we looked at is whether information is included on attempted femicide, which is like the highest risk posed by the perpetrators. As you can see, again, danger assessment and DASH is the one that is very specifically was designed to measure the risk of attempted femicide, while other tools are focusing on risk of recidivism or other type of severe IPVs. The third dimension is what type of abuse the different tool is focusing on. And as you can see, many of these tools are focusing on physical or sexual abuse, while there are only a few that also includes questions, explicit questions on emotional abuse, but none of them includes information regarding online form of abuse, which can be also very important when you work with high-risk perpetrators. As we will see later on, it's not only physical or sexual abuse that can reflect whether an offender is high risk or not, but also there are type of emotional and online abuse that or coercive control, which doesn't include physical or sexual abuse, but these can still mean that the offender is really high risk. So it's better to look at all of them together. The other two dimensions is severity and frequency, which are also key aspects of measuring the risk, the level of risk the potential abuser is posing to the victim, because as Berta also mentioned, we highly encourage you to regularly assess the risk so you can see the change in the severity and frequency over time. And it also gives you a lot of information how you can tailor your procedures, what is missing from the safety planning, how to adjust risk management interventions. As you can see, the last one, the victim's risk appraisal, is the only one that rather focuses on the severity, but not on the frequency, but all the other tools include this aspect at a certain degree. The next one, the length of the tool, like how many items that it include, can also give you a perspective in which situation can a certain tool be used. Maybe the shorter ones are rather focusing on like a screening, a first screening, maybe used by the police at an incident when you just need to have like a quick overview of the situation, whether it requires an imminent risk or what is the immediate step that you need to do. But maybe for other procedures, when you work in longer term together, either with the perpetrator or with the victim, you can have a more thorough, a more comprehensive overview and a more comprehensive analysis of the situation and the case. So for that purpose, probably longer but more time-consuming tools are a better fit. As Berta also mentioned, it's also very important, and all the research and all the experts are emphasizing the importance of including in the risk assessment the victim's perspective. And as you can all see, all of these tools are including this aspect, is because the victims are they are the ones who know the best the perpetrator. They are the ones who can quite accurately measure the risk that their perpetrator poses to them, and also they have all the information what happened in the relationship, what can be expected from the perpetrator, and of course it's their safety which is in the focus of all the interventions. So it's very, very important to include their perspective when we are assessing the risk. Finally, we also wanted to give you just an overview, which are the tools that are publicly available. And even though many of these tools are available publicly, it still means that many of them require a specific training on the use of this specific tool or on the scoring system, what they are using. And what also Berta mentioned, that we highly encourage that maybe some of these tools have their limitations, like lacking gender approach, or they're lacking informational intersectionality, or like other aspects. But still, this can provide you a structured way of looking at each IPV case, which can also serve like a checklist. We will go more into detail why it's very important, but still, to this information gathered through the risk assessment tool together with the victim, like information gathered from victims and other intelligences like police records, child protection services or other agencies. So the more the merrier. So of course, the more information you gather from different sources, the more accurate analysis you can have of the level of risk, potential risk that the perpetrator can pose. And it, of course, influences the interventions that are more effective for victim safety. Okay, now we will delve more into the details of what are the specific things regarding intervening with high-risk perpetrators. once we have the result, like the first questions, how do we define high risk? We have the results. We conducted maybe the risk assessment tool at the intake phase or at the beginning of a program throughout the individual interview. What did we do with the results? What did we do with the information? And what came out during the interviews, that experts differentiated two types of high-risk perpetrators. One, as you can see, are more described as extreme controllers. So it's the more general risk that we know and we aspire from the risk assessment tools and from all the other like police records or information gathered from the victim, that is more related to the offender's behavior and attitude. And the other one is so-called multi-problematic cases. It's more about the conditions, like the living conditions of the offenders, which are not the cause of the abusive behavior, but still they can be an obstacle to effectively engage the perpetrator. And these different types of perpetrator require different type of interventions. And yeah. Probably you are also familiar with these additional risk factors, and we know that they can be also appear or be observed by like lower risk or medium risk offenders as well. But in case of high-risk perpetrators, it's really important to regularly monitoring any changes that comes in their life or in the relationship, because like these additional risk factors, because they are high harm and high risk perpetrators, can lead to like more damaging outcomes for the victims. So it's even more important to regularly monitor whether these appear or whether there are any changes in the relationship. Okay, or any of these appear. Regarding the profiles and attitudes, most of the programs work with adult heterosexual males, and what was also very common regarding their profile is that they had limited previous engagement in the social services. Maybe they needed some social support, but they kind of went under the radar. So they were never really seen. They were kind of out of the system. Obviously, not all of them, and there are many, many different profiles and backgrounds, but those that these experts we interviewed, they work with these type of offenders more often. And what other things that could be seen also is the prehistory of abandonment. So there were like a big crisis, either they're in their childhood or in their early ages, that was like a big trauma for them. And of course, what is also very known in the literature, and probably you also familiar with this type, that they witnessed or experienced violence as a child, or also that they seen like really violent patterns within the family dynamics, like how male relatives treated their female partners or female family members. Regarding the attitudes, the first two, like being really resistant towards intervention efforts and hostility towards facilitator, are a bit more specific to high risk, and it can pose like a big challenge for workers who want to provide effective interventions for these type of offenders. But all the others, like these misogynistic views, extreme jealousy, extreme possessiveness, these codependent tendencies, oh, I cannot live without you, like really holding onto the partner, and others that you can see here. These can be also observed and seen in other like lower or medium risk perpetrators. What is different, that with high-risk perpetrators, it comes with a more extreme level. And also all these attitudes in combination with a really permissive attitude towards super severe violence, like, okay, I can use any level of violence, it still doesn't matter, that what really poses a big danger to the victims, because even in the research of those who committed femicide, they still found killing their partners as possible, like as justifiable, like, okay, it's not they are not violent men, they are still a good people, it just out of the circumstances. So even though these attitudes can be seen in other type of offenders as well, but with high-risk perpetrators, this comes in a more extreme level. The main approaches that we observed, or that the different experts mentioned, are gathered here. And motivational interviewing and goal setting can be also an effective tool at the beginning and of the intervention that directs or focuses on the internal changes. Like there's a goal that the perpetrator can relate to. It's really increases the effectiveness of the engagement, or can increase the effectiveness of the engagement. Regarding risk, needs, and responsivity, this is mostly used in prison and probation setting, because it's targeting and tailored to the risk that the certain perpetrator is posing, and that's why a more tailored intervention can be carried out if you are adjusting to the level of risk that a certain perpetrator is posing. The Duluth-based models are also quite common in this regard, because as was mentioned before regarding the attitudes, these very traditional gender roles and these very misogynistic views are highly common even for high-risk perpetrators, and this model can challenge or aiming to challenge these views, aiming to provide alternative ways to look at relationships, to look at relationship dynamics, to look at the different gender roles. CBT, cognitive behavioral change, aims behavioral change, of course. It can be rather more internalized, but also in case we cannot change the thoughts of the high-risk perpetrators, because as mentioned, these attitudes are really embedded in their views, and it's very hard for extreme controllers to change. But still, these kind of CBT models can provide an approach that if you cannot change their thoughts, you can still maybe change their behaviors, how to handle these thoughts, how to handle different emotions, how to handle different situations. So what are the different behavioral patterns that can be used in this situation besides violence, like instead of violence? And what was really common among each approach, that the focus was on the victim's safety. So all the interventions' main goal was to increase the safety for the victim, for children who are also involved, and with a human rights approach that everyone has the right to live in a violent-free life and calm life, and like safety is really just a basic human right. But what are the main good practices on top of the standards that Berta already mentioned? So I'm not going to repeat those because we take it as kind of default, like, okay, that should be done. But on top of that, what can also help regarding high-risk perpetrators is to have a multi-agency coordination. Why is it important? It's not just like it helps for a more effective communication among the agencies. It helps also, as you can see in the other point, to look at the cases as unit, so not like victims, children, and offender as a separate cases, but also to know and avoid double work and also share responsibilities and also to be more complementary of the services, to know what's going on as a whole case, what's going on with the victim, what's going on in other processes of the offender, what's going on with the children, because then it can have like a more tailored and a more effective intervention. Also, that the workload is shared among the services, the workload is shared among the agencies that are involved. And I think often I'm not alone in this because, of course, as we can see, it's a really heavy workload. But if this workload is shared among agencies, that can create like a better and more effective environment, and also like increase the safety for all. What is also mentioned, how it can be more sustainable if there is a case manager, a focal point, someone who is really overviewing the whole case, someone who is in contact with the perpetrator and with all the other agencies, especially with victim support services, and have really an overview of the whole case, where another intervention is needed. If there is an imminent risk or if there's some change, the information flow can be also more effective. What was emphasized also by the experts is the individual work. As we could see, like these perpetrators have very different level of risk, very different needs, very different backgrounds, and individual work works better, or as I mentioned before, this goal setting can help to engage more effectively the different perpetrators. And after maybe a while, or when the expert team decides that the perpetrator is ready for a group, to engage in a group work, then it can be offered as well. And as one of the expert mentioned, sometimes these peer work can also have an insightful effect on the perpetrators when they hear from their other peers that, okay, there are other ways to deal with these situations. But as I mentioned, most of the experts emphasize the individual work, the individual plan that should be regularly reviewed with the perpetrator throughout the work, and it's rather always tailored to the changes, always tailored to the current situation, because this kind of work requires quite a lot of flexibility. As I mentioned already, the third point, I'm not going to repeat it. The fourth point is the so-called 4 or 6I principle, which means that there's a joint decision either within the team, at least 2 people, like in every situation, in every case, when there's higher risk or like any decision that needs to be made, at least 2 or 3 people are discussing the case. So it's a joint decision among the team members, and if needed, they can also include other agencies if it's relevant or if they are also affected. This also helps to share, like, to have more eyes on the case and to share the responsibility, and also to have more aspects and assessing the risk in a more thorough and comprehensive way. The last one is also one of the key aspects of working with high-risk perpetrators. One option or one of the programs mentioned, the disruptive interventions, which is including like reporting to the police or having more regular contact with the police or requesting restraining order. So it's requires more monitoring and regular monitoring on the offender, which works better with extreme controllers, even if the offender is not or never attended on any session, if they never met in person with the offender. These disruptive measures can also be effective, and supportive measures like redirecting to other services, helping with the housing, helping with finding a job, or providing psychiatric care, which is more relevant for the multi-problematic cases. These can be also effective helps, but it really depends on the type of the perpetrator that you work with. What we also included is an aspect on worker safety. Probably many if you have your own procedures, your protocols, how to deal with perpetrators. Here, just a few points that can be also added to the already existing procedures. One is to have specific continuous training of the staff regarding not just IPV and risk assessment, risk management, but the whole systematic view, the all procedures, the all manuals, so that all the workers have a common understanding of the level of risk, how to manage this risk, how to contact in case of different situations. So there's a common goal and a common understanding on the situations. What were also highlighted by some of the experts, that like practical step, especially at the beginning, if they don't know the perpetrator or they never met, it's just the first contact or the initial phase, and they're not sure about the level of risk that he is posing, then it's good that at least two workers are present during the meeting, or it's no one is alone in the office, or maybe in some cases police can be notified ahead or in advance, but also all the other workers have like an overview of the agenda, who is going to be in the office if someone needs a backup. What it was also mentioned, that the teams meet regularly, so there is a regular discussion on the cases and also on the potential risk and also how to manage that. And supervision is also very important for the mental health of the workers involved. Last but not least, I already mentioned the contact with the police, and maybe some of the offices have even a panic button, as they mentioned, or they have really like a prompt contact that they can immediately call the police if there's an imminent risk. And in some cases, police can also offer workshops like how the different locations can be safer for the workers. What are the tips? What are the safety planning for the workers, which increases their safety? The strengths of these models is just a short summary of those. As the experts said, now we reviewed different models, different approaches, and then also, as Berta mentioned, some of them were carried out in a probation or prison setting, others in community settings, but all programs had a very effective risk reduction. What really helped is really the tailored interventions, that the multi-agency approach, that they work closely together, especially with victim support services, that there is a regular risk assessment, there is a regular discussion within the team, within the organization, and among the agencies. The different destructive and supportive interventions were effective even for those, in case of drive, for those offenders who never attended in person in any of the sessions. But of course, by being continuously monitored, by having this information flow and having this unit, like dealing with the case as a unit and not just by separate cases. The centralized support mapping also means that if we are working together with other agencies, we can, or if it's a new program, we can see in the local setting what services are already available, where the perpetrator program can be offering some advanced or additional services so that the workload is shared and there is no double work, and like really any actor can see the benefits of this multi-agency approach. This is the adaptability and scalability. We measured and analyzed different programs. Some were working in a more local setting, just in a city or in a regional, in a few cities. Others were growing or expanding already in the past few years, and now more embedded in the legal system or in the systematic system. But we believe that any of these approaches or good practices could be added to already existing programs as well, with a little bit of upscale, with adjusting to your local or to your circumstances, to your surroundings. Monitoring and research. There's a lack of research, the effectiveness of many of the different approaches that we've seen, but having this also included in constant evaluation of these programs, as WP also already provides the toolkit. But these can also have to further improve, to further adjust what works best for which type of perpetrator. So if it's included in the work, just also within the organization regarding the programs, that can also help in the future to have like a more tailored, more specified, and more effective interventions. Understanding and changing attitude. This also means that we have a better understanding on the risk. We have a better understanding of the thought processes of these perpetrators, and also how their approach, how their behavioral patterns can be changed. What are the different ways and alternative ways that we can provide them to handle certain situations in a different way, that not violence is not a response, it's not a legit response, and how they can really change their behavior, how can they also be safer for victims and their children, how the social environment can help, like, okay, this is the non-punitive, non-confrontational approach, but still holding offenders accountable for their actions. We understand that it's easier said than done, and there are a lot of challenges to implicate or imply any of these steps. And once we are aware what can be done, what is in control in our hand, what is the smallest step that we can do to overcome these challenges, how these membership, how the different organizations that already have experience in working with high-risk perpetrators can help each other. That also can lead step by step later on to like a better future for all. What are the conclusions that we made regarding the risk assessment tools? As I already mentioned, there is no one tool above all. Each of them have their benefits, their disadvantages. We just wanted to provide a few information so that you can decide which one works best to your current need or procedure or purpose, and it might be different for each case, and you might need to change that over time. The other is that many of you already work with lower or medium risk perpetrators. You have already your procedures, protocols, and maybe adding further steps can adapt or upscale to also work with high risk perpetrators. As we could see, there are a lot of commonalities between those groups. Obviously, high risk perpetrators are more challenging or more complex cases, but by trying to minimize the resistance or focusing really on an individual level or adapting more to their needs, that can already help a lot to effectively engage them in the program as well. Other learning points can be that now we overviewed some of the good practices used for working with high-risk perpetrators, but some of these principles or approach can be also used for medium-risk perpetrators. For example, the 4 or 6 I principles, the motivational interviews, and the more tailored and more flexible approach to the interventions. And I think that was it from my side, and I give back the word to Berta.
Yes, thank you very much, Nóra. Just very briefly, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this year we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary. So for the ones that do not know this, every year we are celebrating an annual conference, and we celebrate it usually in different locations. And this year, because we are celebrating the 10-year anniversary, we will do the annual conference in our headquarters, in the city where we have our headquarters in Berlin. This is going to be from the 21st to the 23rd of October. So please register for the conference. You have, I think my colleague has already shared the link in the chat. Thank you very much, Dure. In here also, as it has been mentioned, we will be sharing the presentation. So here also you have the different links to our social media accounts and our website in case you want to check. So now we have 10 minutes for questions. Also, it's important, I wanted to mention that my colleague will be sharing an evaluation form in a minute. For us, it's very important to get your feedback in all of the events that we organize. And also, we always analyze the results of this feedback. We prepare an annual report that for the moment it's for our internal use. So please it's very brief. It takes just 5 minutes to answer. But it gives us a lot of information about what works, what was more interesting from the events that we prepared, what we could change. So it takes 5 minutes. You have the link in the chat now.
Thank you, Berta. Thank you, Nóra, for that very insightful presentation. We have quite a lot of questions for you, so I'm just going to get started. The first question is there guidance or a document on risk assessment that people who have seen the presentation can check out?
I might take this one. So I wanted to mention, first of all, that these 2 pieces of research, because in reality they are 2 pieces of research that we kind of merge because they are around the same topic. But each of these pieces of research are going to have a specific report. We are now finalizing the report, And this report will also be publicly available in our website. So we will publish in our social media accounts when these reports are ready. We are preparing a specific report on risk assessment tools in which we go a little bit more in detail about the pros and cons of each risk assessment tool and the different characteristics, similarities, and differences. And also we are finalizing the other report on the models of intervention with high-risk perpetrators. So yeah, once this is available, we will make it publicly available. And then also there is a very interesting report from IGE. So IGE did a very interesting piece of work collecting different risk assessment tools, but also different risk management procedures in Europe. It's more focused on police, so it's more focused on practices from police officers, but still I think it's very interesting and it's a very nice reading resource because it gives you a very clear overview of the different practices that we have in different countries in Europe. We will try to share the link in the chat also, so you can check on this report. Yeah, here it is. So yes, this is also a very interesting report.
Thank you, Berta. There's another question. Someone asked that in Cyprus, there is a difficulty of translating the risk assessments into Greek because the law system won't accept them in court. Do you have an opinion on that? Sorry, Berta, you're on mute.
Sorry. I'm not sure I understood, so maybe Nóra, you can also help, but I don't know if the problem is about the translation, so they don't accept a tool that has been translated by themselves, or if it's about accepting a tool in general. I'm not.
Maybe the person who left the question, you can also explain if it's about the translation specifically or about that they don't accept the tool. And in the meanwhile, we can quickly move on to the next question, which is if in the European standards, you recommend the use of a specific tool.
No, so we discussed a lot about this, and we don't recommend a specific tool, partly because of what Nóra has already been explaining, that there's no tool that excels in comparison to the others. There are tools that might be better suited for specific assessment of specific risks or for a specific type of perpetrators or context, even for a specific context, but not one that would be better for all the different contexts and all the different types of perpetrators. Also because we didn't want to endorse specific tools that might have problems that then professionals might have problems accessing them because they have copyright or different variety of issues. And then also because in different European countries there are different procedures and different tools that are used, and our European standards are, as the name indicates, are European wide. So yeah, we wanted to keep it open, also because tools might change. So we wanted to focus on the procedure, as I was mentioned at the beginning, that there is a mix of use of a standardized tool. So we do say that the tool has to be standardized, and also then some professional judgment.
Okay, thank you. Then there is a question about the fifth point of good practices, which you mentioned the integration of disruptive and supportive interventions. And the question is, how do you suggest keeping a good and efficient networking model with police, social services, and others?
Yeah, so again, in the second part, like, okay, disruptive and supportive, and how to keep a good balance of both. I think it really also depends on, that's why regular risk assessment, that's why regular meetings with other agencies, it's very important because it's, as Berta also mentioned, it's not like a static case, but the level of risk can also dynamically change, and also the circumstances and the conditions of the perpetrator. can vary over time. So it really depends on the team of experts, like who are working with the perpetrators together with the victim social services, maybe together with the other agencies involved, like police, child protection services, because it's really what we also mentioned, that it's really tailored for the individual needs. So that's why like regular case management and very intense case management is important, because then you will decide together, okay, what reduces the risk if we or you can even do kind of both, like maybe put a restraint order on the offender but still helping him for finding a house or something like that. But many of these is very, I don't know if you can tell, but many of these were very specific to drive. So, and their report is also available, and we can also share that, so you can look more into details for their suggestions and recommendations. But it's really a continuous, intense work together.
If I might just add something, because there was also the question how to keep good and efficient networking models with police, social services, and others. What we also found, as you will probably also agree with, is that it's very important to have very clear protocols and procedures. And this is something about the risk management and procedures for risk management. This is something that we have seen when we do different research and mappings at WWP with the general perpetrator programs. We've seen that sometimes there is a lack of protocols and guidance how to act when you have different levels of risk, and especially when you have a high risk, and also there is a lack of protocols how to collaborate with other entities, what information to share with other entities and other agencies. So we see that this is really a challenge, and we've seen in the interviews that when working with high risk specific programs such as Drive and other practices such as the Caledonian system, they have very specific protocols and procedures how to collaborate and how to exchange information. So yeah, I think that this is also very helpful to keep the relationship efficient.
Yeah, especially there are a lot of fluctuation in all of these agencies, so that's why standard protocols are very important. So everyone has like a common goal, a common understanding, because many of the time these discrepancies can happen. That okay, different professionals have, or different agencies have different level of knowledge on IPV, GB, yeah, gender-based violence, and also risk assessment. So yeah, protocols, that's why very important. And if you cannot influence the other agency, at least you as a program can have your as a starting point, I guess.
Okay, I think we have time for very quickly the last question, and Konstantinos has sent the explanation for what the question was in the chat.
Yeah, this is what I thought, that it has to do with the translation procedure. Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that you don't have a validated translated tool. I understand the problem. So usually when we translate a tool, we don't just translate it, but we also adapt it to the context. And this is a very, let's say, complicated procedure to then validate it, scientifically validate the tool. So you need quite a lot of responses, and you need a research group to help on the validation. So I definitely understand that this is a huge challenge for you. Yeah, maybe you can also write us an email and we can exchange how this can be done, and maybe we can plan how we can support you in this process.
Thanks, Berta. There is one final question, and we have 2 minutes, so maybe we can quickly get to it. Which is, when it comes to a multi-agency approach, do you have any resources for international agents? And they're asking because they work with a perpetrator who is highly connected, very high risk, and enjoys impunity.
Resources for international agents. Does this mean like international guidance, or I'm not sure I understand. But I think that results that we will include in our report might help on that. And also please check on IGES report because it's international in the sense that it has different European practices. So I guess this might be also helpful depending on the content, I would say.
Great. And there's also someone saying the European Protection Order might be helpful.
Yes, definitely. I mean, if it's a specific, if this perpetrator is already in the judicial system, definitely yes. I'm not sure if he's in the judicial system or not, but yeah.
And maybe also mapping the different local agencies. So if it's like an international setting, then also like which countries are included and what are the similar agencies there. So what is the system? So if also there is someone who could map this or look for this, might be helpful, which we did in another project.
Great. I think we're up. Our time is up. But thank you so much to everyone who attended and left questions. Thank you so much to Berta and Nóra for such an insightful presentation. And before we go, I'm going to share the link to our evaluation form once more. Please do fill it out as it helps us improve the quality of our events. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a nice evening.
Thank you all for coming.
Thanks.